From the moment you're born, you're trained to chase approval. Make people smile, fit in, be liked, be agreeable. Don't cause problems, don't speak too loud, don't be intimidating. And if you do all of this perfectly, if you master the art of likability, you might win the affection of a few people, but you will lose their respect. Because there's a difference, a dangerous one, between being liked and being respected. And in a world of shallow attention spans, fake smiles, and passive-aggressive approval seeking, the man who chooses respect over likability becomes a threat. This video is about that man, the one who stopped trying to please, the one who speaks less but says more, the one who doesn't chase validation but commands attention, the one who doesn't need to be liked because he's respected. This is not about arrogance, this is about control. And Machiavelli understood it better than anyone. You've been told that being liked is the highest form of social success, but Machiavelli would have laughed at that. Because he understood a brutal truth. People will betray someone they like, but they will hesitate to cross someone they respect. Think about it. We live in a time where the loudest, most dramatic people often get attention. But attention is not the same as influence. And influence is not the same as respect. Respect is built differently. It's not about how warm you are, it's about how clear you are. Clear in your boundaries, clear in your values, clear in your standards. Machiavelli was hated by many, but respected by kings, feared by enemies, studied by rulers for centuries. Because he didn't try to be likable, he tried to be effective. And in that there's a lesson. Not just for leaders, but for every man who wants to live on his own terms. Because here's the trap. If you chase being liked, you become easy to manipulate. You say yes when you mean no. You soften your tone to avoid offense. You tolerate disrespect just to keep the peace. You become agreeable and invisible. You vanish into the fog of approval. And eventually, even the people who like you stop listening to you. Why? Because people don't follow the nice guy. They follow the clear guy, the grounded guy, the guy who doesn't flinch when disapproval comes, because he never needed it in the first place. There's a moment every man must face. Do I want to be liked, or do I want to be respected? You cannot have both, not consistently, not if you're truly standing for something. Because the moment you draw a line, someone will be offended. The moment you speak the truth, someone will reject it. The moment you say no with confidence, someone will call you difficult, toxic, arrogant, cold. Let them. Because the man who chases likes becomes a puppet. But the man who commands respect, he becomes sovereign. This video will show you how to become that man. How to stop negotiating your value for social approval. How to embrace Machiavelli's darkest truths and use them to become unshakable. We're going to break down why likability is a trap that weakens men, how Machiavelli understood respect as strategic dominance, how to become respected in silence, presence, and precision, and why modern men fail because they fear being misunderstood. Stay with me until the end, because this isn't just about social strategy, it's about personal freedom. The freedom that comes when you no longer need to be liked, because your presence alone commands respect. Let's begin. There's a reason most people never earn real respect. It's not because they're unintelligent. It's not because they don't work hard. It's because they've spent their entire lives trapped inside the need to be liked. They've confused being pleasant with being powerful. They've mistaken validation for value. And worst of all, they've allowed other people's opinions to become the currency they use to measure their own worth. This is the approval trap. And it's one of the most effective ways the world keeps you small. From childhood, you're rewarded for compliance. Be a good boy. Smile. Say thank you. Be polite. Don't make people uncomfortable. Don't speak unless spoken to. Fit in. Blend in. And every time you obey that script, you're rewarded with a pat on the head and a dopamine spike of acceptance. But deep underneath that approval lies a cost. You never learn to be sovereign. You only learn to be palatable. And that is a dangerous trade, because you were not born to be palatable. You were born to be powerful. Now here's the truth most men never want to admit. Chasing approval makes you manipulable. If your sense of self depends on other people liking you, then your emotions are no longer your own. You'll twist your words to avoid offense. You'll compromise your values to maintain harmony. You'll agree with things you don't believe. You'll smile when you want to scream. You'll become a version of yourself that isn't even real, just to earn the affection of people who don't even matter. And worst of all, even the people you're trying to please will stop respecting you, because they can sense it. They can feel the neediness in your voice. They can smell the weakness in your silence, because no one truly respects a man who needs to be liked. Machiavelli didn't write for the nice guy. He wrote for rulers, men with ambition, men with enemies, men who were willing to sacrifice popularity for effectiveness. And in The Prince, he made something brutally clear. It is far better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. Why? Because love is conditional. It fades, it bends under pressure, it evaporates the moment you stop giving people what they want. But fear, respect, that lingers. Not because you're cruel, but because you're clear. And clarity, in a world of emotional chaos, is terrifying. Let's look at modern life. Every app on your phone is designed to addict you to approval. Hearts, likes, comments, shares, reactions. You start measuring your value by external response. Did they watch it? Did they like it? Did they validate me? And without realizing it, your behavior starts shifting. You post what's safe. You speak what's trendy. You avoid saying what you really think, because the mob might disapprove. You become predictable, boring, forgettable. You gain likes, but lose weight. Now ask yourself, who are the men you actually respect? Are they the most agreeable? Are they the nicest? Are they the most emotionally available? Or are they the ones who speak with fire when needed and silence when it matters? Are they the ones who make people slightly uncomfortable? Not because they're rude, but because they're real. The man who commands respect is not the one who bends. It's the one who stands. And in standing, he becomes polarizing. Some will admire him, some will hate him, but no one will ignore him. Here's where most people misunderstand the game. They think that being respected means being mean, that you have to insult people, cut them down, play the villain. Not true. You don't need to be cruel to be respected, but you do need to be clear. And clarity often feels cruel to the insecure, because when you stop needing to be liked, you start acting from principle. You say what's true, not what's popular. You draw lines, not circles. You remove people who drain you without explaining yourself. And that threatens people because it forces them to confront their own dependency on approval. And that makes them resent you. But that resentment, that tension, that is the seed of respect, because people don't respect what's comfortable. They respect what's unshakable. So here's the mindset shift. Stop aiming to be liked. Start aiming to be remembered. Stop trying to smooth every edge. Start embracing your sharpness. Stop trying to be neutral. Start being necessary. Because men who change things are never universally liked, but they are always deeply respected. Think about historical figures. Marcus Aurelius, Machiavelli, Churchill, Lincoln, Malcolm X. These men weren't loved by all, but they moved nations. Why? Because they didn't compromise their truth for applause. They didn't bend when they were attacked. They didn't ask to be liked. They stood. They spoke. They held the line. And in doing so, they earned a legacy. So what do you do if you've been stuck in the approval trap? You start small. Say no when you usually say yes, just to keep the peace. Hold eye contact just a second longer when someone challenges you. Speak your mind when it shakes. Let the silence stretch when someone expects you to fill it. Stop over-explaining your decisions. Watch how people react and refuse to flinch. Because respect is not given to those who blend. It's given to those who own their presence. You are not here to be liked by everyone. You are here to become undeniable. And the first step is letting go of your addiction to approval. Because when you stop performing, you start leading. And when you stop trying to be liked, you start becoming respected. Let's get something clear. When Machiavelli said it was better to be feared than loved, he wasn't speaking from malice. He wasn't endorsing cruelty. He wasn't glorifying dictators. He was stating a simple truth, the kind of truth most people are too soft to accept. People obey what they fear. People test what they love. This doesn't mean you need to be a tyrant. It means you need to understand power dynamics, how people treat those they feel they can push, ignore, or manipulate, and how differently they treat those who make it clear. You don't get to cross this line. Let's go deeper. When people love you, they want you to keep giving. They become entitled to your energy, your time, your agreement, your warmth. And the moment you stop performing that role, they recoil. They say, "You've changed. You're cold. You're not who I thought you were." But when people respect you, the entire dynamic flips. They tread carefully. They speak deliberately. They adjust to your pace. Because now, you set the standard, and they follow. Fear, in the Machiavellian sense, is not terror, it's not violence. It's psychological leverage. It's the sense that you have boundaries, clarity, control, that you don't need anyone, and you're not afraid to walk away. It's not that people think you'll hurt them. It's that they know you'll remove yourself, and they'll lose access. And in today's world, loss of access is power. Let's translate this into modern reality. You've seen it before. The guy who gives too much. He's always available, always kind, always agreeable, always explaining himself. And what happens? People take advantage. They ignore his texts. They push past his boundaries. They tell him to be patient, to calm down, to compromise. Not because he's weak, but because he looks like he needs something. And neediness, even when wrapped in good intentions, is repellent. Now flip it. The man who moves slowly, who listens more than he speaks, who doesn't flinch when challenged, who doesn't explain his choices, who gives selectively and without obligation. People lean in. They listen harder. They think twice before testing him. They adjust their tone. They want to earn his attention. Why? Because he doesn't need their love. And that makes him respected. Fear, in this context, isn't about making people uncomfortable. It's about becoming predictable in your power. When you say no, it means no. When someone crosses you, you don't shout, you vanish. When pressure comes, you don't panic, you assess. That stillness, that control, that's what Machiavelli was pointing to. He wasn't saying, rule with cruelty. He was saying, don't trust people to love you consistently. Trust them to serve their own interests. So position yourself as someone they can't afford to disrespect. That's fear. That's respect. That's sovereignty. Let's look at how this plays out socially. If you're always kind, polite, generous, you will be praised. And you will also be used. Because people praise what benefits them. And if your goodness is always available, it becomes expected. But if your energy is rare, focused, firm, then people pause before engaging. They think twice before asking you for things. They work to impress you instead of expecting you to please them. And they become careful, precise, intentional. That's not because they fear you like a tyrant. It's because they respect what it would cost to lose your favor. Here's the nuance most people miss. Machiavelli never said to be hated. He actually warns against it. Because hate leads to rebellion, and fear without respect becomes resentment. That's not the goal. The goal is to become a man who is feared because he's decisive, respected because he's consistent, trusted because he doesn't flinch, loved only by those who earn it. In other words, you are no one's emotional hostage. You don't perform for acceptance. You don't plead for approval. You don't sacrifice clarity for connection. You walk the path you've chosen. And people either walk beside you or they don't. And here's the kicker. When you embrace this posture, you actually become more attractive, more magnetic, more influential, because people chase what they can't control. And when you are calm, controlled, and non-reactive, you become a puzzle. And puzzles are irresistible. The man who is calm, but dangerous, warm, but selective, honest, but not over-explaining, direct but not reactive. He doesn't need attention, he doesn't need validation. He is feared because he cannot be moved. He is respected because he cannot be manipulated. And he is admired because everyone secretly wishes they could be like him. This is the core of Machiavellian influence. You do not win by being loved. You win by being necessary. You win by positioning yourself as someone others cannot afford to cross, and not because you'll punish them, but because they'll lose something valuable. Your clarity, your energy, your alignment, your protection, your presence. And when that's gone, they'll feel the absence like a cold wind. That's power, that's fear, that's respect. So how do you apply this? Here's how. Lower your availability. People value what they must wait for. Stop giving everything away freely. Train your non-reactivity. When people try to provoke you, say less, not more. That silence becomes their mirror. Say no without explaining. The man who says no and walks away with calmness gains more ground than the one who argues. Be less predictable. Don't always smile. Don't always reply instantly. Don't be a machine of validation. Be human. Be sovereign. Detach from approval. When you can say, "I'd rather be respected than liked," and mean it, you've stepped into real influence. Because at the end of the day, Machiavelli's advice wasn't just for princes and rulers. It was for anyone trying to survive in a world where people will test you the moment you make yourself available. If you want to command respect, you must first prove that you don't fear losing love. Because the man who doesn't fear loss cannot be controlled, and that man rules. We live in a world of noise. Everyone is talking, everyone is posting, everyone is performing. Men trying to look confident, trying to sound dominant, trying to convince others and themselves that they are in control. But the ones who really are, they're not loud, they're not reactive, they don't announce their value. They sit still, they observe, and when they move, they do so with surgical precision. That is the calm edge, and it is one of the most dangerous forces in the world. Stillness is not weakness, it is not passivity, it is not indecision. Stillness is stored power. It's the mark of a man who doesn't need to react, because he already knows what he's capable of. He doesn't threaten, he doesn't bluff, he doesn't need to prove himself, because his silence is loaded with intention, with confidence, with consequence. Look at nature, and the lion doesn't roar before the kill. The storm doesn't shake until it's ready to break. Power moves quietly until it doesn't. And the men who understand this and who train themselves to be composed, precise, patient, become impossible to shake, because they don't waste energy reacting to the world. They shape it. Here's what most men don't realize. Your energy is your most visible signal. If you speak too fast, move too quickly, or react too emotionally, you're telling the world, "I am not in control of myself." And once the world knows that, you've already lost respect. Because people don't follow force. They follow composure. They follow the man who stays centered under pressure, who makes decisions without panic, who chooses his words like weapons, carefully, rarely, and with full impact. The calm edge is about leverage. It's about knowing that restraint multiplies your power. Because when you don't react, people are forced to react to you. When you don't fill the silence, others will try to escape it. When you don't over-explain, others begin to wonder. That wondering, that tension, is influence. Because mystery creates gravity, and gravity pulls. Machiavelli understood this. In The Prince, he warned rulers not to speak too openly. not to reveal their full hand, not to make decisions from passion, because transparency, when used foolishly, becomes vulnerability, and emotions, when worn on your sleeve, become weapons others can use. So he taught discretion, delay, diplomacy, the art of stillness before the strike. Because when people don't know what you're thinking, they project onto you. They respect you more. Not because you're unpredictable, but because you're unreadable. And unreadable men are never underestimated. Let's break this down practically. The calm man moves slowly, not because he's lazy, but because he's measured. Speaks less, not because he's unsure, but because he's focused. Reacts rarely, not because he's numb, but because he's strategic. When he speaks, people listen. When he acts, people follow. And when he's silent, people watch. Because stillness, when intentional, becomes presence. And presence is the most intimidating quality a man can have. In contrast, the man who is always talking, always arguing, always visible, he becomes predictable, accessible, disposable. His value is spent in the open. His edge is dulled by exposure. His force becomes noise. But the man who saves his energy, protects his silence, and speaks only when it counts, he builds tension, and tension is power. The calm edge is also emotional. Think of the man who's been insulted but doesn't flinch. The man who's been tested but doesn't retaliate. The man who hears the lie but doesn't correct it. Why? Because he knows something deeper. You don't need to control the narrative. When your life already speaks for itself, that's power, and it terrifies people. Because most people are used to controlling others with emotion. They provoke, they guilt, they manipulate. But when you respond with nothing but stillness, they're left with themselves. And that mirror, that silence, it's louder than any argument. But let's be clear, calmness is not detachment. You still feel, you still burn, you still rage, but you don't let those things lead you. You wield them like a blade sheathed in your spine. Because your calm isn't born from apathy, it's born from capacity. You don't need to explode, because you already know what would happen if you did. That is the calm edge. So how do you build it? 1. Control your breath before your words. When you feel triggered, stop. Inhale slowly. Speak after your heartbeat slows. Let your nervous system lead your strategy. 2. Break the need to respond. Someone insults you? Let it sit. Someone doubts you? Let them. Not every reaction deserves your energy. Most things collapse on their own. 3. Train in silence. Practice long walks with no phone, journaling without posting. Study in silence, build in silence, become in silence. So when you arrive, they ask, "Where did this man come from?" Answer high from the shadows of his own discipline. 4. Make your stillness a weapon. Instead of interrupting, pause. Instead of explaining, pause. Instead of defending, pause. Let them fill the silence. Let them reveal themselves. Because when you are calm, you are a mirror. And most people can't stand what they see. This is what Machiavelli understood. He wasn't teaching fear for its own sake. He was teaching restraint. He was teaching controlled presence. He was teaching how to become a man that others can't move, can't read, can't shake. Because in a world where everyone is yelling, stillness becomes the ultimate form of dominance. So the next time you feel the urge to react, don't. Breathe. Center. Remember, stillness is not the absence of emotion. It is the refinement of emotion into force. Unknown. Because the man who stays calm when others panic is the one they turn to when it matters. And that man, that's the one they respect, not because he's the loudest, but because he's the last one standing. There's a reason the most respected men don't act often. They don't involve themselves in every debate. They don't offer their opinion on every issue. They don't rush into every opportunity or defend every decision. They are deliberate, they are measured, they are selective, because they understand something weak men never learn. If your energy goes everywhere, it means nothing anywhere. In a culture addicted to reaction, choosing when and how to act becomes an unmistakable signal of power. It says, I am not easily moved. I choose my battles. I control my time, my emotions, and my attention. That control builds respect, because when your action is rare, it carries weight. You've seen the opposite. The man who's always talking, always defending himself, always replying to critics, always saying yes out of fear he'll be forgotten. What happens? He becomes exhausted, disrespected, easily manipulated. A puppet pulled by the strings of approval, urgency, and insecurity. But the man who's selective, he becomes a fortress. Because people know, if he speaks, it matters. If he moves, it's intentional. If he invests his energy, it's a signal. Selective energy is not about laziness. It's about leverage. It's the difference between a candle burning at both ends and a laser focused into a beam that can cut through steel. Respected men don't conserve energy out of fear. They conserve it to channel it. They know that constant reaction dilutes authority. They don't move for attention. They move with intention. And when they act, the world adjusts. Let's take a Machiavellian lens. In The Prince, Machiavelli warned against rulers who were too eager to be loved, too quick to please, too open-handed with their decisions. Because once a ruler becomes too accessible, he becomes ordinary. And ordinary men are easy to forget and easier to overthrow. Instead, he advised leaders to create a rhythm of calculated unpredictability. A silence that builds anticipation, a delay that strengthens impact, a presence that keeps people guessing. This doesn't mean being manipulative. It means being deliberate. Think about your own life. When was the last time you chose not to respond? Not out of fear, but out of control. The last time you let the noise play itself out. While you sat still planning your next move? That silence isn't passivity, it's positioning. Because every time you don't act, you are building pressure. And when you finally do, you create shockwaves. Selective energy also means protecting your mental real estate. Most men let anyone rent space in their mind. A rude comment, a passive-aggressive coworker, a text that wasn't answered fast enough, an online insult from someone they've never met. They respond, they explain, they spiral. But the respected man doesn't react to every trespass. He enforces emotional gates. He decides who gets a reply, who gets his time, who gets access to his emotional bandwidth. And if someone crosses his boundaries, he doesn't scream, he simply removes access. That is energy conservation at its highest form, strategic detachment. It's the mystery that builds value, not scarcity for its own sake, but purposeful presence. This is why respected men don't over-explain. They don't justify every move. They let their standards speak for them. They're not afraid to walk away from deals, dynamics, or relationships that don't align. Because walking away calmly, cleanly, is one of the strongest displays of self-possession. It shows you're not attached to outcomes. You're attached to standard. And that kind of man, he commands attention, not because he's demanding it, but because others know they can't control him. Let's talk tactics. How do you become more selective with your energy? 1. Audit your reactions. Notice where your time, thoughts, and emotions are being pulled. Ask yourself, is this worth my response? Most things aren't. Train your nervous system to wait before reacting. 2. Create sacred space. You need hours each week where no one has access to you. No messages, no meetings, no noise. This is where you sharpen. This is where power is developed, in isolation. 3. Decide your non-negotiables. What are you willing to walk away from instantly? What behaviors cross the line? Know them, write them, enforce them. Because when you don't have non-negotiables, You become negotiable. 4. Make your presence earned. Don't show up to every invite. Don't answer every message instantly. Don't always be available. Availability without boundary becomes a burden. Make others rise to meet your frequency. This is not about arrogance, it's about discipline. The man who gives everyone his energy eventually has nothing left for himself. The man who gives selectively builds a kingdom around his focus. He doesn't show up everywhere, but when he does, everyone notices. Machiavelli warned that a ruler too eager to please becomes a slave to perception, but a ruler who chooses when to act, who delays, observes, plans, and then strikes, that man builds an empire. He doesn't chase influence, he doesn't demand loyalty. He becomes the kind of man people study in silence. So ask yourself this: are you spending energy to be liked, or conserving it to become respected? Because the world respects the man who isn't everywhere, who doesn't talk all the time, who doesn't explain himself, the man who is still until he moves, silent and until he speaks, absent and until the moment matters. And when he acts, it changes everything. At some point in your life, you're going to reach a breaking point, not because someone hurt you, not because someone rejected you, but because you finally realize the truth. Being liked is never enough. It's temporary, it's transactional, it's addictive, and it will never give you the one thing you actually need. If you want to lead, build, and become something bigger than yourself: respect. You don't build a legacy by being agreeable. You don't earn loyalty by being likable. You don't shape the world by trying to be everyone's friend. You do it by becoming someone that others cannot ignore. And that only happens when you're willing to be misunderstood, willing to be called cold, arrogant, too much, too honest, too blunt. But you endure it. Why? Because the man who is respected outlasts the man who is liked. Let's be real. Most men die unknown, not because they lacked talent, but because they spent their lives trying to please everyone. They softened their edges. They played small. They nodded along. They were liked, but they were never respected. And when they needed real loyalty, real allies, real leverage, it wasn't there. Because they trained people to see them as entertaining, not essential, as pleasing, not powerful. The man who wins, he is not everyone's favorite, but he is the one people remember, the one who drew the line, who spoke when it cost him, who held frame when others folded, who said no and didn't flinch. That man walks through life differently. He doesn't walk in hoping for a smile. He walks in knowing, if I respect myself, the room will adjust. People crave strength, but they test for it first. They'll push your boundaries, they'll challenge your silence, they'll bait you into over-explaining, they'll reward your niceness until it bores them, and then they'll disappear. But when you stand firm, you may lose the crowd, but you gain the respect of the few who matter, the few who recognize discipline, clarity, conviction, presence. That is your tribe, your allies, your future. And they don't gather around likability. They gather around authentic power. This is the cost of becoming a respected man. You will walk alone for a while. You will be misunderstood. You will be whispered about, criticized, misjudged. And then one day, people will start to adjust their tone when they speak to you. Start checking themselves before crossing you. Start telling others, you don't want to mess with that guy. Not because you threatened them, but because you didn't have to. So here's the truth, clean and clear. You don't need to be liked. You need to be trusted. You need to be sharp. You need to be clear. You need to be so grounded in who you are that nothing sways you, not praise, not rejection, not misunderstanding. You don't chase smiles, you don't chase followers, you don't chase applause. You build something stronger, presence. And that presence becomes your shield, your weapon, your legacy. So if this video woke something up in you, if it reminded you of the man you were meant to become, then it's not the end. This is the beginning. You're here because you feel it too. The tension, the frustration, the quiet rage of being too nice for too long. You want to stop being overlooked. You want to stop performing. You want to stop trading your fire for friendliness. You're done playing the nice guy. You're ready to be respected. And if that's true, then this channel is for you. Don't just leave this video behind. Like it. Save it. Send it to someone else who's been playing small. Subscribe right now. Because what we're building here isn't content, it's a training ground. For men who want to walk differently, speak differently, lead differently. For men who are done begging to be liked and ready to become sovereign. This is the age of calm power, clear dominance, dangerous men who choose peace, but never out of weakness. And if that's who you want to be, welcome. Now let's build it.